In section 3-4, we are going to go through the process of when you get to the bottom of a journal page and when you get done with a journal for the month. We'll start a new journal page for each month. So we're going to go through those processes because they have a lot of technicalities in order to make sure that it's consistent and easy to follow. So here is a completed journal page. The gap in the page just shows you that this is not showing the entire journal page. They took out maybe the middle 20 lines or something because they're pretty irrelevant. But if on your note guide it says, if less than 2 lines remain, you must begin a new journal page. So we were down to just having 1 line left here, line 25. So we weren't going to do another journal entry. So instead, we need to go through the process of completing a journal, starting with a single rule. Might be a good idea on your note guide, if you can, to label these different steps as we walk through them. Remember, a single underline shows that we are adding everything above that line. Step 2, we are using the same date as from the transaction before. So equipment rental expense was on the 23rd. So we'll use the 23rd as our date. And then we write the word carried forward and place a check mark in the post reference. Carried forward because we are going to carry these totals to page 2. We've carried forward. 4, you are going to write the total, at least the single underline. So you're going to have to use a calculator, add all these numbers up, a total for each column, and then write the total on that line. And then once you've added up the 2 debit amounts, general debit and cash debit, add those together. Add our 3 credit amounts. If your debits equal credits, then our final step is to put the double underline. So that is a completed journal. Now we're going to take that information over to the start of the next page. So now we're starting a new journal page. So first thing we're going to do is write the page number at the top of the journal. So we were on page 1. Now we're on page 2. Write the date. So same date as we had from page 1. Step 3, now this has brought forward because these numbers are brought forward from page 1. Finally, we will take those exact totals from the bottom of page 1 and record them onto the top of page 2. So we put the next page number at the top right corner. That is from your note guide. Now we're to the point where we're at the end of the month, and we always total up the end of the month. So even though we're not at the bottom of the journal page yet, we still want to total the journal because we're in January, we're going to start in February with a brand new journal page. So at the end of the month, we are going to total exactly like we did at the bottom of page 1. So starting with a single rule, using the date. The difference is the date is now always the last day of the month. So we're in January, 31 days in January. Now instead of writing carried forward like we did at the bottom of page 1, we write totals because these are the monthly totals. Then we'll total up each column as we did, every number in each column, write our totals, and then finally we'll do the double underline just as we did at the bottom of page 1 when we can confirm that the debits equal the credits. So how do we confirm that debits equal credits other than manually adding the 2 debit amounts and the 2 credit amounts? Well, we could use something called this proof, proving and ruling a journal page. So we have our different columns, general, sales, and cash. And we'll do this in the work together as well. And then we take the numbers straight from those totals and fill in these columns. So we have a general debit amount and a general credit amount. For sales, we only have a credit because we don't ever debit sales. Cash, a debit, and a credit. When those 2 equal, debits equal 12,868, credits equal 12,868. Then we could go back to our journal and put that double underline. Another thing that we do at the end of every month is prove cash. So we are proving that the amount of cash that we have based on our journalizing and our records matches the amount of cash we actually have in our bank account. Because at the end of the day, if we think we should have $10,000 but the bank only has $8,000, then we only have $8,000 and there's an issue. So at the end of every month, we prove cash. So proving cash. You start out with the money that you have at the beginning of the month. Well, we started maybe a brand new company with $0. Next, we take the total cash received during the month. Total cash received during the month would be equivalent to our cash debit amount. Every time we receive cash, we debit cash. So that is where we find that number. Next, we're going to find out the amount that we spent. Cash spent, that would be this amount, $4,523, the cash credit. So sure enough, we have 7,120 that we've added. 0 plus 7,120. Then we're going to subtract our cash credit amount, 4,523. That's the amount of cash that we have spent. And we have, based on our calculations, we should have $2,597 in the bank account. How we prove that is by using our check stub. On check stubs, when we complete a check stub, we keep track of the balance that should be in the bank account. So our balance, based on our next unused check stub, should be $2,597, which matches what we have based on our journalizing. So we are good to go. That is how you prove cash. You want to do that at the end of every month to make sure that just kind of a double check that our journalizing matches what the bank has. The final thing that we're going to discuss is correcting errors in journal entries. We talked about 3-1, how journals are a permanent proof of documentation of our journal entries. So journals are not to be changed because that could lead to fraud. So when you make an error, there are special ways that you need to do this. You need to correct your error. So the first situation, right here on the 28th, you could see that we have 400 crossed out. So we had debited advertising expense for 400, credited cash for 400. So in this situation, we need to cross out our error, and because we caught this before the next journal entry occurred, we were able to just write the correct entry right below it for $40 instead of 400. Easy mistake to make. So number 2, if the entry is incorrect and is discovered before the next journal entry, you cross it out and write the correct one below. The third one is when we make an error and we don't catch it until maybe the end of the month and we've already journalized transactions below. Well, we know that journals have to be in chronological order, so now we cross out our error, which is just the difference between we had originally debited supplies expense when it should have been miscellaneous expense. So we write miscellaneous expense right above our error. So on your note guide, there are 3 questions. When is a general journal page completed? Question number 1. That is when there is a double underline at the bottom of the page. That's how you let someone know that the journal is done. Number 2, if an entry is incorrect and is discovered before the next entry is journalized, how should the incorrect entry be recorded? Well, that's the situation where you cross out the incorrect entry and write the correct one below, like we did here on the 28th. Finally, step 3, if several correct entries are recorded after an incorrect entry is made, what do you do with the incorrect entry? Well, that's when you just have to write it small, right above the error. Now, because we are using MindTap, the situation is a little bit different. Also, if you're ever, filling out your work together and you make an error, because we're in class and we're learning, erase your error and fix it later. But this is the correct way of correcting these two entries. So that is section 3-4, and we'll go through these in section 3-4 work together and apply these new skills that we have learned.